to get a chance to come and talk to you. I'd love to come when I'm invited by Felipe, because I know that you guys learned a lot from him. I've learned a lot from him, no question about it. I enjoy actually talking tough issues through with him. And I always appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to his classes. As he indicated, I'm a law professor, and I grew up in Indianapolis. Went to school in Indianapolis Public Schools in '74, graduated from North Central High School, went down to Indiana University where I did my undergraduate work in accounting, graduated in '78. Then I went to law school, graduated from Yale Law School in 1982, came back here, and at the time I came back here, I was the second black to work for a law firm any size in the state of Indiana. I don't think there was a Hispanic attorney who worked for any of the law firms here until the mid-90s. In '87, I went back to Bloomington to become a law professor, and that's what I've done the last 23 years, focusing primarily on race, law, and education. Now, I'm going to make an assumption as I start, because what Felipe asked me to do was in some sense to tell you the story of African Americans in the U.S. And therefore I'm going to assume that you don't know the story, or that you've heard the story, but you haven't heard the story from someone like me. So I'm going to tell you the story in some sense, because I think you got to understand history to really understand the African American situation in this country today. So they're on the ship, and it takes 45 days to get them to the West Indies, or they came into Virginia. Virginia was a place where a lot of slaves came into, as was South Carolina. And after all of that, right, sow it again. Okay, sow it again. So now you got some new masters who have to teach new lessons, and they really have to drive their lessons down hard, because they're the ones who are going to sell you to the ultimate consumer. Where you understand, right? You the slave seller, and you're going to sell somebody to someone else. Well, you might have to warranty that this is a good slave who's going to listen, who's going to take good instructions. So that means you got to get that slave right. You got to make sure he's so afraid that whatever anybody tells him to do, he's going to do. So there's a whole new process of victimization that goes on once they get to either the West Indies or to America. And then let's just say they're in America. Then they get sold finally to the people who are going to buy them. And once they're sold to the people who are going to buy them, right, they're going to work. You're talking about people who are going to work from sun up, actually from a couple hours before sun up to a couple hours before sundown, 6 days a week. They get Sunday off because the slave masters are good Christians, right? The Sabbath is a day of rest. So you get Sunday off, but the rest of it is hell. Now I'm assuming you know about slavery once they get here. That is our creation story. That is how my people came to be. I mean, literally, that was the experience of our ancestors. So this is the way black people come to America. We are the product of the greatest eugenics experience in the history of humanity. And our ancestors suffered more than any single group of ancestors ever. But they suffered on the African continent, and then they suffered during the transition, and then they suffered once they got here. This is how we started. And the transatlantic slave trade is eventually ended January 1 or December 31, 1807. I want to do this because, see, Felipe talked about the fact that where he first met me was after I took his brother on a trip through Ghana. And Ghana's a country that the British dominated during the transatlantic slave trade. And to the extent that you could pick out one country or one space where a lot of blacks' ancestors came from, it would have been through Ghana, through the British castle on the Ghanaian Atlantic coast, onto the West Indies and onto America, or on directly to America. And the reason I take the kids there, and it's primarily intended to be a trip for black kids that'll do two things for them. One, it'll show them what their life would have been like had their ancestors not been brought over here as slaves. And the second point is to give them a real good sense of what the experience of their ancestors really was. So what I'm going to do for you is I'm going to start by telling you the creation story of the African American people. In other words, this is the story about how we were created as a people. And right, keep in mind, in Africa, the black people who come over here to America were members from different countries, different ethnic tribes. What would happen is they would be pulled from different places through Africa, down into Ghana, down into here. Nigeria was another place for the transatlantic slave place of departure. But the black people in America came from 100 different villages and represented 1,000 different peoples. They were very, very different. But over here, they became African Americans. So what I'm going to tell you in as vivid a terms as I can is that creation story. This is how we came to be as a people. Effectively, it was like this. People would have been in their villages, and they would have been cooking their fires, they would have been with their friends, with their relatives, with their family members. They would have been enjoying life, hunting, fishing, raising food. Good life. You know, the women would be talking about the party that's going to go on. The guys would be talking about the beer that they were going to drink. I mean, basically a good life, not a lot of troubles. And then in the middle of this enjoyment, let me try this. Yeah, I can't do that. Along come these raiders. Along come these guys to their villages. These black guys to their villages. They weren't their people. They were another people. And they would come and they would raid them. And let's say there'd be a couple of hundred of them. And they'd take everybody in the village. Okay, we have now come. You people in this village are now mine. You now belong to us. They would start the process of putting chains on them. And they start the process of beating and whipping, right? Because if you come and you grab a bunch of people in their village, you figure what, the biggest guy, so you'd be the biggest guy, you'd be the meanest guy, right? You wouldn't put up with it. So you say, okay, come on now. So the first thing you do is you kill him. And you kill him in front of everybody because you're sending a message. And the message is you're not going to tolerate any stuff. Now you might say, okay, well, you're his sister. Let's rape you in front of everybody. Let's say you're the mother. Let's rape you too. Because we're sending a message. This is a new day. We, the raiders, are now in control. You people now belong to us. And if anybody's got some lip about it, but you don't take lip